An 18-year-old walked into a car dealership with his own money, ready to buy his first car. Without a second thought, they kicked him out. The very next day, his billionaire mother showed up and made sure they would never forget his name. Omari Thorne had his entire day mapped out. It was a late Thursday morning in Smyrna, Tennessee. The air hung heavy, like a summer storm was about to break loose. But Omari didn't mind. He wore a simple gray jacket, black cargo pants, and worn white sneakers. Tucked under his arm was a blue folder containing 5 printed listings for used hybrid cars, each under $15,000 and with good mileage. He wasn't there to impress anyone. He was prepared, ready to start a new chapter. Omari had just graduated from a top high school in Murfreesboro and earned a spot in Georgia Tech's engineering program. He needed a reliable car for the long drives between home and campus. Nothing flashy, just something dependable that wouldn't leave him stranded on the highway. When he stepped inside Crestview Motors, a small but flashy dealership, he was calm and confident. He even held the door for a woman walking out. She smiled at him warmly, but the receptionist behind the desk barely glanced up. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cold and distracted. "Yeah, I'm here to check out some hybrids you have listed," Omari said, holding up the folder. "I printed them out. There are a few Sonatas and a Civic." The woman blinked slowly. "Are your parents with you?" "No, ma'am. I'm buying it myself." She gave a tight smile and motioned toward the lot. "Someone will be out shortly." But no one came. Omari waited by the door, glancing outside. He spotted the Civic he wanted, the exact one from the listing. He took a step toward it, but stopped abruptly when a tall salesman in a red polo stepped in front of him. "Lost?" the man asked, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning Omari's clothes and sneakers rather than the folder. "No, I'm here to buy a car," Omari said firmly, holding out the folder. The salesman didn't take it. "This isn't a place to hang around if you're not serious. We've had some problems lately." "Problems?" Omari asked, confused. "Yeah," the man said, lowering his voice. "People coming in, looking at cars they can't afford, snapping pictures, stirring up trouble. You get the idea." Omari's stomach tightened, but he kept his voice steady. "I printed these listings myself. I'm not taking pictures. I just want to test drive one." The salesman forced a laugh. "Come back with a parent or someone who can handle financing." "I don't need a parent. I'm paying cash. It's my money," Omari said, steady. "I've already spoken with my bank." The salesman took a step back, his tone softening but still firm. "Look, I'm not trying to be rude, but people get ideas sometimes. I just don't have time for this right now." Omari didn't move. He just stared, feeling the folder grow damp in his hands. "So, you want me to leave?" "I'm saying we're busy today. You can come back another time. Or maybe try one of the used car lots down the street. They might have something more your budget." That was it. Omari didn't argue or raise his voice. He glanced once at his folder, then toward the Honda Civic parked across the lot. He gave a small nod, not out of agreement, but to show he understood. Without another word, he turned, walked to his car, and drove off. What the workers at Crestview Motors didn't know was who Omari Thorne really was. On the drive home, he didn't play music, just sat with the quiet and the soft patter of rain against the windshield. He wasn't the type to shout or break things. He thought deeply, sometimes too quietly. Taking the longer route, he passed the old park where he used to race bikes with his cousin Elijah. He drove by the small library, its windows still plastered with last summer's reading contest posters, faded but stubbornly hanging on. The streets were the same, the quiet was the same, but this time, everything felt different. Like the road beneath his tires wasn't quite as steady as before. When he got home, Omari sat in his car for a moment, hands resting on the wheel, watching raindrops trail down the glass. Inside, the house smelled of lavender and coffee, his mom's favorite scents. She always said they helped her feel in control of her day. Without a word, Omari slipped off his shoes and headed to the kitchen, opened the fridge, and poured himself a glass of water. Upstairs, Dr. Ayanna Thorne was on a work call. Omari could hear her voice, calm, clear, and confident. She was the kind of person who could hold her own in a room full of top doctors one minute and be the rock her son needed the next. When she came downstairs later, she found him on the couch with his laptop and folder spread out in front of him. "Find any good cars?" she asked gently. He paused before answering. "I went to Crestview. They had some okay options." She sat across from him, studying his face. "Did you drive any?" "No." She tilted her head. "Why not?" "They told me to come back with a parent. Said I looked like I was just wasting their time." He said it plainly, like he was reciting facts from a list. Ayanna pressed her lips together, not out of anger, but as if gathering her thoughts carefully. "Did something happen?" Omari shook his head. "It's whatever. I wasn't going to argue." "I just left." She studied him carefully. "Did they say anything specific?" "Not really. Just acted like I didn't belong." Ayanna stayed silent for a moment. Then she leaned forward, resting her hand briefly on his knee, before standing and starting to put away dishes from the sink. But her mind wasn't on the chores. Omari returned to his laptop, scrolling through car listings. Another tab showed his bank account balance. He had enough money. He knew that. Yet, in that moment, he'd never felt smaller. What he didn't know was that, upstairs, Ayanna was already in motion. She wasn't the type to raise her voice or cause a scene. That wasn't her style. She believed in precision and quiet action. When she spoke up, people listened. That night, she called a friend who worked in property insurance, a contact who had done business with Crestview Motors. Just a few questions. Who owned the dealership? How was it managed? Who handled customer relations? By morning, she had all the answers she needed. Omari was still asleep when she backed the Rolls-Royce out of the garage. She rarely drove it. It was more a symbol than a necessity. The Rolls-Royce was a gift from a French pharmaceutical company Ayanna had worked with years ago. She'd almost sold it once, but her mother stopped her. "Sometimes people need to see what success looks like," her mother had said, especially those who thought they already knew. As the car rolled onto the road, its silver trim caught the morning sun, gleaming like quiet armor. This wasn't about showing off wealth. It was about making a statement. At 9:30 a.m., the doors of Crestview Motors slid open. Same lobby, same woman at the front desk, fingers flying across the keyboard, eyes glued to the screen. But this time, it wasn't Omari who walked in. First, she noticed the car, a midnight blue Rolls-Royce Dawn, polished to a mirror shine, bearing Georgia plates. Not your typical sight at a small-town dealership. Then came the woman stepping out. Dr. Ayanna Thorne didn't need to say a word to command attention. She strode in wearing a tailored navy suit, silent heels, and only a sleek silver watch as jewelry. No smile, no anger, just quiet, undeniable power, the kind that makes people sit up straighter without even realizing why. "Good morning," Ayanna said, her voice calm but firm. The receptionist blinked, momentarily thrown off. "Good morning." Are you here for a service appointment?" "No," Ayanna replied, setting her bag gently on the counter. "I'd like to speak with the manager." Sure. One moment. The receptionist quickly grabbed the phone, dialing as her eyes flicked toward the Rolls-Royce outside. Less than a minute later, a man appeared. A man in his mid-40s, wearing a crisp dress shirt, a Bluetooth earpiece tucked in one ear. He looked like he was always just finishing a call. "I'm Dan Green, the general manager," he said, extending his hand. Ayanna didn't take it. "You spoke to my son yesterday. He's 18, black, quiet. He wore a windbreaker and brought printouts of cars. You told him to leave." Dan's polite smile faltered for just a moment. "Ma'am, I see a lot of people. Maybe there was a misunderstanding." Ayanna opened her bag, pulled out Omari's blue folder, and laid it on the counter. "He came in with this, showed your staff exactly which cars he wanted. He had his loan lined up, could have paid cash, but he left without even test driving one. Do you know why?" Dan's smile disappeared entirely. "There's no need to turn this into a fight." "It's not a fight," Ayanna said, her voice steady and calm. "It's just facts," Ayanna said firmly. Dan sighed. "Look, if he felt unwelcome, I'll personally help him next time. I can show him our stock myself." "That won't be necessary." Dan frowned. "Then how do I fix this?" Ayanna picked up the folder, flipped it open, and held up one of the listings. "You see this Honda Civic? Your team said it was too expensive for him. You assumed he couldn't afford it. You didn't know who he was. But that's not even the worst part." She set the paper down gently. "The worst part is that even if he was just a hopeful kid with no money, he still deserved respect." Dan shifted uncomfortably and finally looked away. Ayanna reached into her bag again and pulled out a single business card. The car was sleek black, with her name embossed in shining silver letters. Dr. Ayanna Thorne, CEO of Oratech Biolabs. "Next time a young man comes in that prepared," she said, "ask for his name before judging his worth. You never know who you might be rejecting." For a moment, the room went silent. The receptionist stopped typing. A salesman by the door froze. Ayanna locked eyes with Dan. "Just so you're clear," she added quietly, "I didn't come here because my son asked me to." "He didn't even want me here," Ayanna said quietly. "He told me to let it go. But that's the difference between us. He forgives, I remind." Dan's throat tightened. Ayanna adjusted her bag and turned toward the door. "Oh, and the car outside," she added, glancing back over her shoulder. "Not for sale. Just making a point." Without waiting for a response, she walked out. But the conversation inside wasn't over. Not for Dan, nor for anyone who'd seen her. Dan stood frozen for half a minute after the door closed behind her. His ears burned, not from shame, but from understanding. He wasn't new to this job. He knew when someone was stirring drama and when someone was speaking the truth. And Dr. Thorne had come with the truth. Behind him, the receptionist whispered, "Was that her son yesterday?" "The kid Dan didn't answer. In his office, he sat down, clicked his pen, and stared at his desk for a moment. Then he called in the salesman who'd turned Omari away, the same man in the red Crestview polo. "Chris, shut the door," Dan said firmly. Chris looked nervous. "What's up?" he asked. "Remember that kid from yesterday? The black teen who asked about hybrids?" Chris nodded. "Yeah, the one looking near the Civic." Dan folded his hands. He wasn't just hanging around. He had papers, listings, and a loan ready. "His mother came today," Dan said. Chris smirked. "Okay, but he looked—" Dan cut him off. "He looked like what?" Chris hesitated, mouth half open, then stayed silent. Dan leaned back in his chair. "Ever think we don't get many black buyers here because they walk in, see how we treat them, and leave?" Chris shifted uncomfortably. It's not like that. You sure? Dan asked. She didn't shout or demand anything for free. She just wanted us to know who we dismissed, not because he couldn't afford it, but because we assumed he couldn't. Chris stared at the floor. Dan pointed toward the window. Every week we blame online sales and time wasters, but maybe the problem is us, judging people before they even speak. Chris said nothing, likely recalling the many young men he'd turned away with the same weak excuses. Meanwhile, back at home, Omari was still in bed, earbuds in, watching a video about solar-powered batteries. His morning was calm. He had no idea his mother had returned to the dealership that had turned him away. But he didn't need to know. She wasn't there for praise. She did it because she'd seen this happen before. As Ayanna drove home, old memories surfaced, not from anger, but from experience. When she was 24, working in a pharmacy lab in Columbus, Ohio, a supplier once mistook her for an intern. At 30, she pitched her first artificial blood idea to a room full of men. They barely glanced at her. Only her white business partner caught their attention. Once, during a panel discussion, someone asked if she was the advertising person. No matter how many degrees she earned, some people only saw what they wanted to see. She wasn't trying to shield Omari from this harsh truth. She couldn't. But she could make sure that the next time someone judged him, they'd remember her words. That afternoon, while Ayanna sat in a Zoom meeting in her home office, Dan from Crestview Motors sent out a staff memo. It wasn't a grand speech, just a simple reminder to treat every customer with respect, no matter their appearance. He knew it wouldn't fix everything overnight, but it was a start. He didn't act out of fear of bad press or lawsuits. Ayanna hadn't threatened him. She'd simply spoken the truth, clear and firm, in a way that couldn't be ignored. And the person who needed to hear it most wasn't even present. Ayanna hadn't always been the kind of woman who could walk into a dealership and silence men mid-sentence. That kind of confidence wasn't given. It was forged through struggle, through pain, and through the refusal to look away. She remembered being a quiet girl in Birmingham, standing in line for free school meals. Her mother cleaned offices at night. Her father left when she was 6. While other kids skipped class to smoke, she buried herself in science books from the library. People called her too serious when she stayed silent, too bold when she spoke up. So she focused on one thing: building something no one could ever take away from her. When most kids slept late on weekends, Ayanna made her son wake early, not to punish him, but to show him the real world, beyond the safe space she had created. She taught him when to speak up and when to walk away. So when he came home quiet the day before, she wasn't surprised. He had learned to control his anger, not because he was weak, but because she raised him to understand that sometimes silence carries more weight than rage. What hurt her most was how easily he accepted it. Not because he didn't care, but because he was used to it. That thought lingered with her all day. Her son, with his near-perfect grades, early acceptance to a top tech school, and calm demeanor, had already accepted being seen as a threat. Ayanna remembered when he was 10. A neighbor had called the police, reporting a strange boy walking through yards. That boy was Omari, coming home from basketball practice with his gym bag and science project. She recalled the police car pulling up and Omari sitting on the curb, not scared or confused, just tired. She never told him. But that night, she began researching security systems, not to keep others out, but to protect him from being misunderstood. She knew the world wouldn't always offer her son the kindness she fought so hard for. That's why she taught him to move like water, strong, flexible, and calm. That's why he didn't argue at the dealership. And that's why she did. Later, Omari came downstairs with his backpack and asked, "Do you still have that list of better dealerships?" Ayana handed him her phone without a word. The note was still there, better options. He scrolled and stopped at one. "Think this place will take me seriously?" Ayana paused. "They'd better." Omari gave a small smile, but his eyes shifted. He wasn't angry, just more aware. Neither of them knew someone else had been watching their story unfold. The next morning at Crest View, Motors felt different. No big meetings, no announcements, but the air had changed. The sales floor, usually buzzing with fake smiles and forced charm, was quieter than usual. Not silent, but more thoughtful. That morning, Dan, the manager, had made a decision. While shaving, staring into the mirror, he saw more than stubble. He saw a man who'd let something rot from the inside. He hadn't just failed one kid. He'd let a whole culture slide. One that prized appearances over fairness. One that judged before listening. He got to the lot early. Chris was already by the Civic, the same car Omari had wanted to test drive. Dan pointed to it. "Get this one fully checked. Tires, battery, everything." Chris raised an eyebrow. "You think that kid's coming back?" Dan shook his head. But it's not about him anymore. It's about what we do next." Across town, Ayana had already moved on. She didn't post about what happened. She didn't call the news or seek attention. That had never been the goal. She didn't go there out of rage. She went to remind them, calmly and clearly, that actions have weight. That dismissing someone has consequences. As she sipped her morning coffee on the porch, her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Some folks only see what they choose to, until you show them what they've overlooked." Omari, meanwhile, was already messaging someone at a different dealership across town. One that had answered all his questions online without hesitation. No awkward pauses when he asked about paying in cash. No second-guessing his tone. He wasn't in a rush. He knew exactly what he needed, and what he would no longer accept. Later that day, Ayana got a call from an unknown number. She almost let it go to voicemail, but curiosity won. "Dr. Thorne? This is Dan Graham from Crestview Motors." She stayed silent. "I know you didn't ask for anything," he continued, "but I wanted you to know. We spoke to the team. We're changing how we approach walk-ins, especially young customers. We're starting a bias training program next month. I know it's not everything, but it's a start." Ayana didn't say thank you. Not out of rudeness, but out of clarity. "Make sure it lasts," she said. "I will," Dan replied, then added, "And tell your son. He made more of a mark than he probably realizes." After the call, Ayana stood in her kitchen, phone still in hand. She didn't need praise. That was never the point. But something in her settled, not just because they admitted they were wrong, but because they finally wanted to do better. That night, Omari walked in holding a car key. "Think I'll take the Sonata," he said. Ayana looked up from her laptop. "From the second place?" He nodded. "Yeah, the guy there explained everything. No weird vibes, just facts. Felt different." She smiled. "You like it?" "Yeah, not flashy, but solid." "That's you," she said. He paused. "Did you say something to them?" She leaned back in her chair. "I had a talk." He raised an eyebrow. "A serious one," she said. "I wasn't there to shout, just to show them what they overlooked." Omari nodded slowly, then gave a half grin. "Thanks." Ayana shrugged. "You thanked me by staying true to yourself." What they both knew, but didn't need to say, was that silence isn't weakness. It's a strategy, and sometimes the strongest message is the quietest one. A week later, the Sonata sat in their driveway, still shiny from the shop. Omari had driven it around town, getting comfortable. He liked how it felt, smooth, steady. No flash, just purpose. He never mentioned Crest View again. Not because he forgot, but because it no longer defined the outcome. The lesson had settled in like rain into dry earth. Ayana saw it in the quiet ways. How Omari carried himself in public, how he double-checked his money before paying, how he asked if he should dress up when helping his cousin shop for a truck. He wasn't pretending. He was adapting, just like she had. Time and time again. They didn't need long emotional talks. Their understanding lived in the quiet spaces. A glance across a room. A nod when something hard was understood without being said. One evening, while Omari helped his cousin practice parking, Ayana sat at her desk reviewing papers. Her eyes drifted to a photo taped to the corner of her screen. Omari, at 9, grinning wide in an oversized shirt, holding his science fair ribbon. Behind him stood their old Honda, the car she'd driven for years. What made her smile wasn't the award. It was the light in his eyes, the hope. He'd always had potential. Now he had something even stronger, certainty. Not in wealth, not in revenge, but in himself. A few days later, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside, a short handwritten note. We're better now because someone showed us why we had to be. Thank you, Crestview Motors. She folded the note and tucked it away. Not to remember them, but to remember that people can change when they're finally made to see what they've long ignored. That night, she told Omari about the letter. He chuckled. Guess they finally got it. Ayana smiled. You got it a long time ago. He shrugged, but his grin stayed. Still feels good, though. She laughed softly. Yeah, it does. Outside, the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the driveway. Omari stood next to the car, arms crossed, just looking at it. Then he got in, started the engine. No music, just quiet motion. No audience, only the ones who mattered. And in that moment, it was clear. He didn't just get a car. He gained something deeper, self-respect, understanding. The kind of strength that doesn't need to shout. The knowledge that how the world sees you doesn't define how you see yourself. That real power sometimes lies in walking away, without losing your voice. Stories like Omari's happen every day. Not all end with a new car in the driveway, but each holds a moment, a chance to pause, reflect, and see people fully before judging them. If this story moved you, made you think, or reminded you of someone, share it. Let it ripple. Let others feel it too. And if it stayed with you, follow along. More stories are on the way. The kind that speak softly, but leave an echo.